Welcome to Echo Ekoji, the official monthly podcast of Ekoji Buddhist Temple, available on YouTube. I'm your co-host, Andrea Chapman.
And I'm Joe Gochi. Each month we bring you conversations with Sangha members and special guests to explore Jodo Shinshu Buddhism and its impact on our lives.
Today we are excited to welcome Rob Fike, Minister's Assistant at Ekoji Buddhist Temple. Rob's life journey has taken him across the globe, growing up as an army brat in Europe, training in martial arts, and working in IT security, all of which have uniquely shaped his path to Jodo Shinshu Buddhism.
Rob's deep curiosity and commitment to the Dharma led him to Ekoji, where he studied under Reverend Kaz Nagata and eventually completed the Minister's Assistant program. His thoughtful Dharma talks and candid reflections on the teachings continue to inspire and guide our Sangha.
Rob, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
We're looking forward to learning more about your life, your practice, and your insights into living the Dharma. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where did you grow up, and what was your family like?
Certainly. Like many others in this area, I'm an army brat. And that means, like those other folks, we moved around every 3 to 4 years. I was born in Colorado, stayed there maybe 6 months, moved to Texas. Don't remember any of that. Moved on to Virginia. From there, we went to France. When de Gaulle kicked everybody out, we went to Germany. Spent a couple years there, came back and back to Virginia, moved to Maryland, and then went to high school there and came back to Virginia again after, went to college in West Virginia, college in Clemson in South Carolina, and then moved back here to my first official job in the federal government, and been here ever since.
Rob, I have a number of friends who have been fortunate enough to have grown up in different parts of the world. And I'd like to ask you how your experience as an army brat, living in various places like France and Germany, how did that shape your worldview?
Well, at the time, I didn't realize it. Of course, it was one of the things we kid about is, both my sister and I, is that when we were saying, oh my God, another castle, do we really have to go see that? But, my parents were great. They took us around all over Europe, and this was before the EU and the European community. So one of the other jokes was that after we came back to America, every time I hit a toll booth, I was asking my parents, what country are we going to now? So it was kind of fun, in retrospect, and particularly being able to see all the different cultures and eat the different foods. Luckily, my parents helped us with that too. They made us eat different things of the culture instead of yet another hamburger, even in Germany. So it was good from that perspective. I got to experience a lot of different things and understand at least, as much as a preschooler and first and second grader can understand those sort of things. I was lucky enough, for example, my parents, we lived on the economy in France, meaning not on the base. We're in a regular town in a French village. My parents said, yeah, deal with it. Go to French preschool. My first written language was actually French. And there was only one teacher who knew a little bit of English, but kids are resilient. They learn things. And I honestly thought French was what people spoke at school and English was what they spoke at home.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
It sounds like a really wonderful early childhood. Your mother's time in occupied Japan and her influence on your exposure to Japanese culture is also fascinating. Can you share some of those early memories and how they might have influenced your interest in Buddhism?
Yeah, my mom also was an army brat. Her father, too, was a physician in the army. He was one of the interesting things she shared with me was that they were stationed at Pearl Harbor just before the war broke out and got out of that weeks before the bombing. He was a medical a medical physician overseeing most of Eastern Europe during the war, or I'm sorry, Eastern Asia during the war, stationed in India and, of course, going to different places. After the war, they were stationed in Japan, occupied Japan, in the early 50s. And my mother went to 3 different high schools in Japan, ultimately graduating from Yokohama American High School. And she told me about different times when she and her friends would go out to Tokyo and just have fun going around as high school girls on the weekends and learning about different things. It was really fascinating to me in that perspective. But she also was an artist as well as a trained nurse, and she collected different art. And throughout my memories, even young, there were just subtle reminders of Japanese culture. We had statues and paintings, and I always remember one statue of this guy, probably 2 feet high. It was one guy sitting cross-legged in his regular work, Japanese work kimono, and he was fixing a fishing net. Just little things like that all over the place. And later on, she taught me how to use chopsticks, which nowadays you think about, well, everybody used chopsticks. But back in the 70s and 80s, having, a European American kid learning how to use chopsticks was pretty unusual.
Rob, I live south of Seattle, in Auburn, Washington, and I've been taking Qigong and Tai Chi lessons
Yep.
down at the local community center. So I'm fascinated. I was fascinated when I heard that you have taken martial arts, Aikido, Tai Chi. Is it Hapkido? And,
Also.
and I'd like to ask you, how have those disciplines informed your spiritual path?
Well, again, one of the things my mom did when I was in probably second grade was enroll me in judo classes. I think part of it was so that she could have time away from us, but still, I got that exposure of Japanese culture. In college, I later took Aikido, which I focused a lot on what are known as internal martial arts, where it's not strength and speed that are the important things, but the ability to control oneself and to control the situation. And that's one of the classic points of Aikido is that you're really at the top of that martial art. You're trying to control your opponent so that they don't hurt you and themselves. That's important when you think about it. And the head of the Aikido who started it, O-sensei Ueshiba, actually wrote several books about that, and I enjoyed the philosophy of it. And similarly with Tai Chi, it's based on Taoist philosophies. And I read a lot about that when I was taking Tai Chi for about almost 10 years. And a lot of concepts of meditation are very important in Tai Chi. Tai Chi it really comes from Qigong. So you may be familiar with some of those things and philosophies. As a matter of fact, that's going to be one of my talks this month for Dharma is Taoist philosophies and interpretations and its impact in my understandings of Buddhism. Of course, like the Japanese, who have Shinto and Tao and Buddhism, the Chinese have Confucian's Taoism and Buddhism all linked together in their society. So it's interesting to get those connections. I've always appreciated a martial art more if it had a philosophical background than just simply, like lately I've taken, about a year ago, I took Okinawan karate. Good stuff, but it didn't have as much of a philosophical thing that I'd really appreciated in both Aikido and Tai Chi. Similarly with Hapkido, it didn't have as much philosophy in the background, even though I went ahead and went through and got my black belt in that. It just after a while didn't appeal to me as much because of that lack of philosophy.
Just yesterday, I had an opportunity to attend a service with Mrs. Terada. She's in her 80s. She was the first woman to attain a black belt in judo in the United
Excellent.
States.
Cool.
Very cool. So, Rob, during a recent Dharma message, you talked about your career in IT security where trust is scarce. How do you reconcile that mindset when you are simultaneously exploring a spiritual tradition that is built on an entrusting heart?
Well, as I said in my Dharma talk, I really haven't got that far yet. I'm kind of working almost as if, in top secret things where they have containerized their life. Yeah, but I'm trying. That's the important thing I think here is, we're taught in IT security, people will do silly things. There's thousands of attacks a second against the Microsoft infrastructure. The internet is a bad place, but Good things happen on the internet. Um, People are people. Sure, they make mistakes. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, they're going to click on phishing emails. Sorry, that happens all the time. We get literally one of the top internet email providers estimates that 90% of email on the internet is either spam or phishing. Eh, okay, that's the daily life I deal with from that. But I try to use the practice to understand the human aspects of it too. And balancing those two is still a challenge.
Rob, one of the things I appreciate about this tradition is that whether you're a minister assistant, whether you're 3 or 75, you're walking the same path together. And I
Indeed.
appreciate the fact that you tell us when you're struggling to try to master or understand a concept. So for those who might be new to Jodo Shinshu, and they're struggling to understand a concept like the entrusting heart, what advice or perspective might you offer them?
Well, mostly ask other people. Ask your Sangha members, ask the minister's assistants, what does it mean to them? After my Dharma talk, I literally had a lady who was visiting come up and say, well, how do you do this bounce? And the answer was, I don't yet. I'm still trying. But that's the most important thing, I think, is to go and talk to other Sangha members, other people, other ministers, and say, what does the entrusting heart mean to them? How do they interpret it? And maybe you'll find something that resonates. Of course, and reading, always reading and listening to what other people say.
Thank you.
Excellent advice. I think people really appreciate the authenticity that you offer them. So, how did you first discover Ekoji Buddhist Temple, and what drew you specifically to Jodo Shinshu Buddhism?
Well, originally I started off looking at Buddhism from a philosophical standpoint. Coming from the different martial arts I was exposed to. Actually, one of the earliest exposures of Buddhism in particular was from the 1970s show Kung Fu with David Carradine. Loved it. It was one of my favorites. But that there was the Shaolin Buddhist monk that had been taken off and exiled to the Midwest or to the West at the time. But reading different books and articles about philosophical aspects and getting into Buddhist philosophy through psychology mostly. At a certain point, I just said, hey, I want to see what this stuff's really about. And I did some research and found a Nichiren variant that was being practiced by some people in the area and seemed to be very popular amongst certain entertainers. And I figured, okay, let's give it a shot. And I went to several of their meetings and found that it really wasn't for me. They focus on their equivalent of reciting the Nimbutsu, but for asking things for literally asking for various things to happen. Coincidentally, one of the ladies I hired later after I started in Jodo Shinshu turned out to be this same type, and I took it from her that whenever she did this Nimbutsu equivalent for me to get stuff, it was not as an insult, saying, "Oh, this is wrong," but saying she's trying to be nice. This is what she's trying to do for me, and I appreciate that for her. I don't think it's going to be effective, but I appreciate that. Then I was just happened to be at the street festival with the National Cherry Blossoms annual show and the Japanese Street Festival there, and Koji had a booth. And they were handing out free literature. I read it and found out the stuff, the temple was only less than 10 miles from my house. So what excuse did I have not to go? Been there ever since.
Rob, recently I heard you mention the name of Reverend Kaz Nagata and how his chanting and book review sessions were impactful for you. For our listeners who might not recognize the name, can you tell us about him just briefly?
Yeah, Reverend Kaz was the temple minister at the time when I joined Ekoji. He a younger fellow, had a wife there. He lived actually in the house just across the street when that was the temple house for the. It's kind of interesting to think about it when this huge house with only two people in it at the time. Later had his son, but it was interesting because one of the first things that struck me coming to the services at Ekoji was his deep and resonant voice when he was doing the chanting. Um, I think if my memory serves me right, I think he told me he actually studied Gregorian chanting too. So and that's something that I had liked as a kid listening to Gregorian chants. My dad was into music too, and I played French horn in high school, so I had some music background, and Gregorian chants were just cool every once in a while. But the chanting just struck me. And later to find, that he later, like many other ministers, had said, you don't have to understand it word for word. Just use it as a really nice time for meditation and appreciate what's happening. And then you can get into the meanings. So I liked that. Also, one of the things that Reverend Kaz did was not only, had book sessions for the Sangha members. And we'd sit down and either walk through the different books and try to, talk about our own interpretations of it, much like what Andrea does with the discussions of the Dharma messages afterwards. But one of the ones that really impacted me was when he sat down with about seven of us and once a week went through character by character and retranslated the Tanin show.
Wow.
It was really he one of his specialties was medieval Chinese / Japanese. So he basically we went through and retranslated. It was really interesting.
Terrific. Thank you.
Fascinating. So to follow up on that, could you share a moment when you felt deeply connected to Jodo Shinshu teachings or had a personal realization about the Dharma?
Well, while it may sound cliche, most recently with the passing of my mother in September, I found that, of course, aspect of impermanence, and I was lucky enough to be able to help her first when she moved up here and we got her into a retirement village. And then as she became more ill, unfortunately, due to her bone marrow cancer, and moving her into hospice and the like. I was with her when she passed, and since she had the bone marrow cancer, she effectively died of asphyxiation even with the different medicines that she was being provided and being there while she passed away from a lack of breath. It was a very difficult personal experience, but the Dharma helped me understand that yes, this is one of the major things that happens to everyone eventually, and everyone experiences at some point or the other, and this is what the historic Buddha tried to help us overcome is these issues of impermanence, understanding that we're going to lose loved ones.
Rob, you and I have shared a similar experience than losing our mothers within the past year. I appreciate you sharing that with us. In a recent Dharma message, you talked about the concept of interdependence and your own life experiences. How do those moments of interdependence support your understanding of the tradition?
Well, again, I can go back to my parents. They not only found that while I was struggling in elementary school that I actually had dyslexia, they helped me find that out through that, but they supported me all along the ways. One of the therapists literally told my parents, I didn't find this out till decades later, literally told my parents that, that I would be okay, it would be a good thing that I'd just be able to be a regular member of society and don't expect me to be able to go to college or anything like that. And it's like, luckily they just ignored that. They just said, yeah, okay, thanks. They helped me get through all the learning problems. It took me to special sessions, bought me all sorts of things. My dad got me into Heath kits. Anytime I showed anything of interest that might be learning, particularly reading, they bought it for me. It was there, bang, done. I finally, in junior high school, started to like science fiction, and by the time I was in high school, had a near library of science fiction books. Every time I went to the bookstore, it's like, "Oh, you want that one? Here, thanks, good." So, that to have their support through that, now that I recognize it throughout my life, that truly changed my path. They expected me to go to college. They expected me to do these things and be able to be success. Not only expected, but supported me in getting there.
It's true.
And to find out that there is a way to express that gratitude through quote unquote a religion, I think was really important for me. To get that understanding that, you don't do it by yourself.
Yep. Thanks.
Ekoji features a letter from Renyo Shonen's Gopuncho in many of its Sunday services. Why are the letters included, and what do you think are the most important messages in the book for modern American practitioners?
Well, as far as I understand, the readings of the letters are really a normal part of regular services. And it's just something that we hadn't been doing in Ekoji for a while, and it more recently was taken up, and for some reason I was asked to do it. So there you go. But for the message, what I found, at least in the 30, Renyo wrote hundreds and hundreds of letters. The 30 some odd that we've gotten in the book, that's the quote unquote official one that we've been passed around, are only 30, or only a small amount of them that are selected out of that. And I think that's just the ones that have been agreed to. I've recently found the translations for more through the BCA book site and asked Reverend Rye if I can read from those. And he said, yeah, go for it. So hopefully we'll be getting some more letters, readings. But the message that seems to be consistent, certainly in the 30 that we've seen there, is the entrusting heart. Everything, it'll start out saying things about different stuff like the construction and the different areas and of that, and then it'll end up with the entrusting heart. Somehow or the other, that was one of the major things that Renyo taught. And along the lines, that's certainly not different from what Shinran taught, but it's certainly what he emphasized over and over again. One of the things, though, I am concerned about is that reading these letters outside of historical context may make them kind of questionable. Particularly, for example, the one about construction at Yoshizaki, I think it's called, and who cares about a temple being built at this place there? Okay, we end up with the interesting art. So what? They've constructed a temple, but if you don't understand that Jodo Shinshu was being persecuted, monks of another type, another Buddhist sect, were actually killing people, other monks, because they believe in Jodo Shinshu. They were burning temples. These things were happening in that time frame with Renyo, and he was trying to preserve his followers and the teachings. And so that building that temple after he had to flee for his life at least twice, that's important. That puts a whole different spin on the construction. It's like, yeah, okay, which now, by the way, is Osaka Castle. He chose that area specifically so that it could be defended from. It was built as a castle, a temple, to keep his followers and the Jodo Shinshu safe. Another one, a similar example, is when they talk about women, being in the things. Well, okay, the letter to women saying that you're part of Jodo Shinshu. It's like, well, of course you are. We think, yeah, sure, women are Jodo Shinshu. That doesn't make any difference. But back then, a patriarchal society, yeah, very different aspect, and that was a radical concept, unfortunately. Now, luckily, it's not. So taking those historical concepts and applying them to the letters, it's not an easy thing to do when you're just sitting up there and quoting them. But hopefully we can get a little more information about the background so that we can understand the aspects and of them more deeply.
With your help, we're going to be able to do that. Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask you to dive a little deeper into that area.
Mhm.
Uh, how has Renyo informed or challenged your thinking about Jodo Shinshu Buddhism?
Well, again, it gets back to the entrusting heart. I really didn't think much about that before reading Renyo's letters over and over and over again. Um, it was brought up, of course, and I sort of just ignored it. Like, yeah, I paid more attention to the other aspects of Jodo Shinshu. But then seeing that Renyo every time, over and over and over again, gets back to the entrusting heart, and that he's teaching that as a major concept from Shinran himself. Well, something I got to work on.
Yeah, that's it. In fact, as he bawls people out when they come to temple because they're looking for sake and
Right.
rice and food, and he says you should never leave here without coming to grips with Shinjin or this entrusting heart.
Yes.
Yeah,
And there's fascinating conversations of people talking about, even nowadays, using the term Shinjin instead of entrusting heart. Is the translation hindering us from understanding it better? And maybe that's, I think, more discussion we should look into. At least I'm going to.
absolutely. Thank you.
That would be fascinating. How do you integrate Jodo Shinshu teachings into your everyday life, especially in your work in IT security?
Well, as I mentioned before, it's almost diametrically opposite in some cases with IT security. But what I try to do is focus on the aspect of people instead of just the technology. The technology can be, it's the tool. It's the thing we use to get things done for people, by people. And that's the teachings have helped me try to, when I get frustrated, it's like, oh, this person did something really stupid. It's like, oh, well, this person is doing a job and it's just a tool. And yeah, they may have done something that, Rob, you don't like and think from your, 25 plus years as an IT security person wasn't smart, but maybe they haven't had that same experience as you have. Maybe they're new to computing and maybe nobody's taught them this. So I try to look at it from that perspective of that, you know, everybody's a person. Everybody's a potential Buddha. Everybody should be treated that way, even if it's not something that my professional opinion of them has agreed with.
Rob, can you share a moment when saying Namo Amida Butsu, I take refuge in Amida Buddha, brought you peace or clarity?
Well, again, while it may be cliche, just before my mother was cremated, I held a little ceremony for myself, my son, and my wife, and yeah, said the read the white ashes and did the chanting, and that helped me right there. That was nice, but um, other times, in less serious situations, shall we say, for example, if I'm just going on a walk and I'll see like most recently a tree that had changed to the most brilliant orange red from the fall colors of this maple tree along the lines. I'll just say Namana Amida Butsu. Thank you for letting me see this. It was the sunset. Thank you for letting me see this sunset and being there and it is shared with everyone who wants to take the time to look at it, and I try to do that.
Beautiful. What do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities for sharing Jodo Shinshu in today's world?
I really like this question. I think that in the Western world anyway, obviously I think we have a very limited exposure to what Buddhism is. It's either Tibetan or Zen. And I've been wondering, why is that? And to me, it's that those celebrities who have brought that out to the public have made that Buddhism. That's what the celebrities have shown, and not in, well, I mean, sure, intentionally, but they're not trying to exclude others. I don't think so. But we don't have that celebrity backing. You don't have somebody, some actor or actress to sit there and say, "Yeah, Jodo Shinshu." So if you come along and say, "Hey, this is a different style of Buddhism that you don't have to shave your head and you don't have to wear robes and you don't have to give everything up," they may say, "That's not real Buddhism." Um, that I think is one of the challenges that we it is an everyday Buddhism, and we that doesn't appeal to celebrities in that sense. It's hard to advertise, yeah, this is everyday Buddhism. It's great, but that it's not. It's just not so different and unique and special from that perspective of catching one's eye. So how do we translate that out into the public? How do we get them to understand that, yes, this is Buddhism too? And by the way, it's a lot easier in some ways. Obviously, and the trusting heart is still an issue for me.
Rob, this has been a delight. I really am grateful that we've had this conversation, and I believe other people will as well. We always end our interviews by asking the same question to Sangha members. What does Ekoji mean to you?
I'll say probably the classic. It's a small s sacred space. It's a place where I can come talk to people who have the same concerns and can help me, and where I can let go of all the daily grind, all the problems of IT security. I can say, okay, the internet's a bad place, so what? I'm here in Ekoji. Um, I can, for example, one of the things I used to be cynical about was the idea of ritual. But I've since learned that, it brings people together and allows one to let go, to focus on the ritual itself and, burning of incense, ringing of bells, those sort of things. It's a small S sacred space.
Excellent.
Rob, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Your honesty, humility, and willingness to share your struggles and discoveries on the path are truly inspiring.
I really appreciate how you weave your life experiences from martial arts to cybersecurity into your understanding of Jodo Shinshu. It's a reminder that the Dharma meets us exactly where we are.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Echo Ekoji. If you enjoyed the conversation, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit ekoji.org to learn more about our temple and upcoming events.
And share this podcast with friends and family who might be curious about Buddhism or looking for a spiritual community. Your support helps us continue spreading the Dharma.
We'll be back next month with another meaningful conversation. Until then, take care, stay curious, and may the light of Amida Buddha illuminate on your path. Rob, could you lead us in closing Gasho?
Namo Amida Butsu.
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 Namada, it's namada, it's namada. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Until next time, take care and be well.